Imagine being one of the most talked about quarterbacks in college football. Every Saturday, millions tuning in, scouts filling the stands, mock drafts slotting your name next to franchises that haven't had a real signal caller in years. Now imagine sitting in the green room on draft night, watching pick after pick roll off the board and your phone stays silent. First round, nothing. Second round, silence. Third, fourth, nothing. Then, deep in the fifth round, pick number 144, the Cleveland Browns finally call your name. That's exactly what happened to Shedeur Sanders during the 2025 NFL Draft. And what unfolded in the days that followed made the slide itself look like a footnote. Because within 72 hours, a rumor surfaced that had the entire sports world doing a double take. Reports started swirling that Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback, the son of Coach Prime, had quietly agreed to a deal worth $175 million. Not with an NFL team, not with a CFL squad, with the Chinese Basketball Association. Basketball. And when Deion Sanders broke his silence on social media, instead of calming things down, he poured gasoline on every single flame. But before we get to what Deion posted, and why it convinced thousands of people this might actually be real, we need to rewind. Because the draft night slide is where this whole thing cracked open. Heading into April 2025, Shedeur Sanders wasn't some fringe prospect hopping to hear his name called. He was a legitimate top-tier quarterback. At Colorado, under his father's program, he put up numbers that rivaled anyone in the country. Tight spirals into contested windows, composure in the pocket that coaches drool over, a highlight reel that could fill a hard drive. Multiple draft analysts had him inside the top 15. A handful projected him in the top 10. The conversation wasn't if he'd go in the first round. It was which team would trade up to grab him. Then draft night arrived, and reality looked nothing like the projections. Team after team passed. Names he'd outperformed got called before him. The cameras cut to the green room a few times and you could see it on the faces of his family: confusion, frustration, something close to disbelief. Behind the scenes, rumors suggest several front offices were uneasy. Not about Shedeur's arm, not about his football IQ. The whispers pointed at something else entirely: the Deion factor. Reports claim certain organizations felt uncomfortable with how involved Coach Prime was in his son's career trajectory. Some front office executives reportedly worried that drafting Shedeur meant inheriting Deion's influence, his media gravity, his willingness to speak up publicly when he disagreed with how things were run. Whether that concern was fair or overblown depends on who you ask, but the result was undeniable. Shedeur Sanders fell. He fell hard. Pick 144. Fifth round. Cleveland. After the dust settled, Deion spoke publicly. And if you watched that clip, you could hear the weight in his voice. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't putting on a show. He paused, gathered himself, and said something that stuck with a lot of people. He talked about his son's character. He said Shedeur wasn't malicious, wasn't out there causing trouble, that he tried to do things in the community, that people had been saying unfounded things for months, and the season itself proved most of it wrong. His voice cracked slightly when he said, "I'm just thinking about my son and what he's going through." That wasn't performance. That was a father watching his kid get undervalued in front of millions, knowing the work that had gone in, knowing the sacrifices that were made. It hit differently because Deion Sanders almost never shows vulnerability. The man built an empire on swagger and confidence. Seeing that armor slip, even for a few seconds, told you everything about how personal this was. But what came next is where the story took a hard left turn that nobody was prepared for. Hours after the draft wrapped, Deion posted on Instagram. No long caption, no press conference-style breakdown, just a photo of him and Shedeur both smiling wide, standing side by side. Next to the image, a Chinese flag emoji and a basketball emoji. That's it. No explanation, no hashtag, no follow-up story clarifying what it meant. And within minutes, the comment section turned into pure chaos. Is Shedeur going to China? Did he just walk away from the NFL? Coach Prime, what are you saying? The questions piled up faster than anyone could answer them. But Deion didn't respond. He didn't clarify. He didn't delete the post. He just let it breathe. And then he made it worse or better depending on how you look at it. Over the next 48 hours, more clips appeared on his accounts. Shedeur Sanders, not in a football facility, not throwing roots on a practice field, but on a basketball court. And this wasn't casual shooting around. He was running full-court drills, pulling up from well beyond the three-point line, moving like a guard who'd been doing this for years. The footwork was sharp. The release was clean. It didn't look like a football player messing around with a side hobby. It looked trained. It looked intentional. Then came the caption that sent the entire internet into overdrive. 4 words on a black background. They said it couldn't be done. Watch us do it anyway. That line didn't feel reactionary. It felt premeditated. It felt like something the Sanders family had been sitting on, waiting for the right moment to release. And now the moment was here. The skeptics called it a publicity stunt. The believers called it a power move. Everybody else just kept refreshing their feeds, waiting for what would drop next. And what dropped next was a bombshell that made everything before it look like a warm-up. A Chinese sports journalist with reported connections inside the CBA published a claim that sent shockwaves across every major sports platform. According to the report, Shedeur Sanders had agreed in principle to a 5-year, fully guaranteed contract worth $175 million to play professional basketball in the Chinese Basketball Association. Not football, basketball. And when projected endorsement revenue was factored in, deals that would reportedly include Chinese tech firms, sportswear brands, and streaming platforms, the total package could climb past $200 million. Now, it's important to pump the brakes here for a second. At the time of these reports, nothing had been officially confirmed by Shedeur, Deion, or any verified league representative. The sourcing traced back to overseas media outlets and anonymous figures described as having league ties. So treat this as what it was at that stage, a massive, headline-grabbing rumor that hadn't been locked down with receipts. But the reason people didn't just laugh it off and move on is because of what the rumored contract details looked like. Reports suggested the deal included flexibility clauses that would allow Shedeur to pursue independent business ventures while playing. Endorsement freedom, meaning the league wouldn't restrict which brands he partnered with. Media appearance rights that would let him build content, do interviews, and maintain his social media presence without league approval bottlenecks. And possibly ownership stakes in ancillary projects tied to the league's expansion strategy. If even half of that was accurate, this wasn't a standard athlete contract. This was a lifestyle infrastructure deal designed to turn a young athlete into a global brand ambassador. And the thing that caught most people off guard, Shedeur reportedly didn't laugh it off either. People close to the family said he was taking meetings, asking questions, and evaluating every angle. Deion, according to those same whispers, wasn't shutting it down. He was encouraging the exploration. That detail alone made seasoned analysts pause, because if Coach Prime, a man who lived and breathed the NFL for over a decade, was genuinely open to his son bypassing the league, something deeper was at play. Here's what most casual observers missed in the chaos of the headlines. Shedeur Sanders and basketball isn't some random pairing pulled out of thin air to make a story sound dramatic. The kid has a real history on the hardwood. Go back to his high school days, and you'll find a dual-sport athlete who wasn't just filling roster spots in both arenas, he was producing. Division I college basketball coaches were reaching out. Scouts were showing up to his games. He was being evaluated as a legitimate point guard prospect at the highest levels of high school competition. The tools were there, and they were obvious. Quick hands, natural court vision that let him find cutters and read defenses in transition the same way he'd eventually read coverages from the pocket. A smooth mid-range pull-up, perimeter range that forced defenders to close out honestly, and the mentality, that unshakable composure he became known for as a quarterback, showed up between the lines on the court just as vividly. Coaches saw a player who didn't rattle, who controlled pace, who made everyone around him a little better. He chose football. The Sanders name, the legacy, the path Deion had blazed, it all pointed toward the gridiron. And Shedeur followed that thread with elite-level commitment, but basketball never left. That's the part people keep overlooking. He didn't walk away from hoops and never look back. He kept training. Reports claim he worked with professional-caliber skill coaches even during college football seasons. Not casually, not once-a-month pickup runs. Structured sessions with NBA-adjacent trainers focused on shooting mechanics, ball handling precision, and conditioning specific to high-level basketball. He was sharpening a second blade while the whole world watched him wield the first. So when the CBA rumor surfaced and people scoffed, a quarterback playing pro basketball overseas, give me a break, the reaction exposed a blind spot. They were dismissing the idea based on the football label without examining the basketball evidence. And if the CBA did its homework, which any league committing that kind of money would have to, they didn't see a football player dabbling. They saw a multi-sport talent with a global following, a bulletproof brand, and skills that had been maintained at a level most people didn't realize existed. Now let's talk money. Because once you strip away the emotional reactions and the hot takes, this decision, rumored or real, lives and breathes on the financial math. And the math tells a story that should make everyone pay attention. Shedeur Sanders was drafted in the 5th round, pick 144. In the NFL's current rookie contract structure, that slot carries a 4-year deal worth roughly $4.6 million. 4 years, $4.6 million. That's not poverty money by any standard, but in the context of what was being discussed overseas, it's a rounding error. $175 million guaranteed versus $4.6 million partially guaranteed with incentives. The gap isn't a crack. It's a canyon. And the word that changes everything is guaranteed. In the NFL, even first-round quarterback contracts come loaded with conditions. Performance benchmarks, roster bonuses, playtime incentives, mechanisms that let the team control how much money actually hits your account. Injuries can void portions of deals. Coaching changes can shift roles. A new general manager can decide you're not part of the plan, and suddenly your leverage evaporates. That's not hypothetical. That happens every single year. Talented players get caught in front office turnover and franchise instability, and the guaranteed money they thought was secure turns into a negotiation they didn't anticipate. Overseas, different ecosystem. If these reports are accurate, the CBA was offering fully guaranteed money with no salary cap pressure, no franchise tag headaches, and no weekly physical collisions with 300-pound defensive linemen hunting your blind side. From a pure risk management perspective, the argument writes itself. You're comparing controlled, capped, injury-vulnerable NFL earnings to uncapped, fully secured, globally positioned income in a sport with significantly lower physical toll. That's not emotional. That's arithmetic. The CBA's play here makes sense from their side, too. The league has invested billions in recent years trying to elevate its international profile. They've studied the NBA's global blueprint, how star power creates attention, attention creates broadcast revenue, and broadcast revenue builds legitimacy. Signing someone like Shedeur Sanders wouldn't just be adding a player, it would be importing a spotlight. He carries millions of social media followers. He generates debate on every major sports network. His last name alone draws cameras. That crossover visibility is worth far more than what shows up on a stat sheet. The CBA wouldn't be buying a point guard. They'd be buying a global marketing engine. And if you look at history, this path has been walked before. Stephon Marbury went to China after his NBA career shifted and became a cultural icon. Not just a player, a celebrity with statues, brand deals, and influence that extended far beyond the court. The CBA audience embraces American athletes who bring personality, confidence, and showmanship. Shedeur Sanders checks every single one of those boxes without trying. None of this happens in a vacuum, though. Behind every move Shedeur makes, there's a figure who's been orchestrating career strategy at an elite level for decades. Deion Sanders isn't just a supportive father cheering from the sidelines. He's the architect. Think about who we're talking about. This is a man who played professional football and professional baseball at the same time, not sequentially, simultaneously. He suited up for NFL games on Sundays and stepped into a Major League Baseball batter's box during the week. When he did it, people called him crazy. They questioned his commitment. They said no one could perform at the highest level in two sports without one suffering. He answered every doubt with a Hall of Fame football career and a World Series ring. He didn't just prove it was possible, he made it look inevitable. That mindset, the refusal to be boxed in, the instinct to leverage attention across multiple platforms before platform was even business vocabulary, is baked into how Deion parents. His Instagram post after the draft said it plainly. He wrote, "Proud father. I push my kids to be greater, to correct my wrongs and magnify my rights. My kids are built for whatever comes their way. We're prepared for whatever because I got them no matter what." That's not just a motivational caption. That's a mission statement. He's telling you directly, this family doesn't operate on one track. And Deion understands the NFL machine from the inside out. He's lived through the injuries. He's seen teammates get cut after giving everything. He knows how coaching turnover can destroy a player's development arc overnight. He knows that front office politics can sideline a talent for reasons that have nothing to do with ability. When the CBA opportunity reportedly appeared, Deion didn't react the way most football fathers would. He didn't say, "Forget that, focus on the league." He reportedly told Shedeur to explore every angle, to sit in the meetings, to ask the hard questions, to weigh the numbers against the risk. That's not reckless parenting. That's a man applying 30 years of professional sports experience to the most important decision of his son's early career. He's seen the ceiling of the NFL. He's also seen the floor. And he knows that guaranteed security, global brand positioning, and career autonomy are assets that don't depreciate with age or injury. Shedeur himself has spoken about how Deion raised him. He's mentioned how his father moved the family from a massive 25,000 square foot estate to a more modest home across town, not because they had to, but because Deion wanted his kids to develop grit, humility, and the hunger that comes from understanding life isn't always the penthouse. He sent them to public schools. He exposed them to different environments. That wasn't accidental, that was conditioning. And it produced a young man who doesn't flinch when the world tells him to follow one path, and he sees a better one. Of course, not everyone sees a visionary move here. The criticism has been relentless, and it started the second the rumors gained traction. Let's walk through the loudest arguments because they deserve direct responses. First, the "he's running from competition" narrative. This one falls apart under the slightest examination. Shedeur Sanders has been under a national spotlight since the moment Deion took the Colorado job. Every snap, every incompletion, every post-game interview dissected by millions. He played in stadiums packed with hostile crowds, handled media pressure that would crack most adults twice his age, and performed under the kind of scrutiny that turns ordinary games into primetime theater. That's not a resume of someone afraid of competition. Exploring a different path doesn't equal retreat. If anything, walking into a completely new sport in a completely new country against professionals who have trained their entire lives in that discipline, that requires more confidence, not less. Second, that he couldn't make it in the NFL take. Based on what? He hasn't failed at the professional level because he hasn't been given a real runway yet. He was drafted in a lower round than expected, but draft position doesn't define capability. Tom Brady went in the 6th round. Dak Prescott went in the 4th. Brock Purdy was the very last pick. The assumption that a 5th-round selection means a player can't compete at the highest level is historically illiterate. And choosing a better financial opportunity over a risky one isn't evidence of inability. It's evidence of clarity. Third, that he's not a real basketball player dismissal. This one ignores documented history. He was recruited by Division I basketball programs. He competed at high levels in both sports. He's reportedly been training with professional caliber coaches throughout his football career. Skill doesn't vanish because you choose to focus on a different sport for a few years. It atrophies without maintenance, sure, but every indication suggests he maintained it. And no professional league hands out a contract in the 100 million range without putting a player through internal evaluation. Film review, performance testing, scouting analysis. The CBA would have done its diligence before putting that number on the table. Fourth, the Chinese league is a joke argument. This is lazy analysis dressed up as expertise. The CBA isn't the NBA. Nobody's claiming it is. But it's a structured, well-funded professional organization with competitive rosters, a massive domestic audience, and billions in infrastructure investment. Dismissing it ignores how global sports economics function in 2025. Basketball is an international game. Revenue streams cross borders. Brand partnerships span continents. Pretending only one league matters is like pretending only one country buys sneakers. The world is bigger than that, and the money reflects it. Here's where the conversation elevates beyond one player and one rumored contract. Because whether this specific deal finalizes or dissolves into nothing, the ripple effect is already in motion. What Shedeur Sanders represents, or at least what this situation represents, is athlete empowerment reaching a new frontier. For decades, the path was linear. High school, college, draft, cross your fingers, take whatever the league offers and be grateful. That conveyor belt worked for the leagues. It kept power concentrated on the ownership side. It kept players competing against each other for limited slots while the organizations held the leverage. But the landscape is shifting. Media rights are global now. Sponsorship markets don't stop at American borders. Fan engagement is decentralized across platforms that reach every continent simultaneously. An athlete with a strong personal brand doesn't need one league's permission to be valuable. They can create value anywhere eyeballs exist, and eyeballs exist everywhere. If Shedeur steps into the CBA and thrives, not just as a player, but as a cultural figure, a brand ambassador, a content creator, a business partner, it sends a message to every elite prospect sitting in a draft green room wondering why they have to accept whatever's offered. It says there are other options. It says leverage doesn't only come from competing teams within one league. It comes from competing leagues across the globe. That changes negotiations. If NFL franchises realize that top-tier young athletes can credibly walk away and secure generational wealth overseas, the power dynamic tilts. Not overnight, not dramatically, but enough to matter. Enough to force conversations about guaranteed money, player autonomy, and brand freedom that front offices have historically avoided. And here's what many critics miss entirely. This path doesn't close doors, it opens them. Careers today are fluid in ways they never were before. Athletes move between leagues. They build international resumes. They return to domestic markets with enhanced leverage because they've proven they can generate value independently. A few dominant seasons in the CBA wouldn't disqualify Shedeur from future NFL involvement. If anything, it could amplify his negotiating position. He'd return not as a player begging for a roster spot, but as an established global brand with proven market value, asking the league what it can offer him. That's the chess move Deion sees. Secure guaranteed income now. Expand the brand internationally. Reduce physical risk compared to absorbing weekly hits from NFL defensive fronts. Build business relationships in one of the world's largest economies. Then evaluate domestic options later from a position of financial strength instead of contractual desperation. That's not impulsive. That's layered strategy executed with patience. So here's the question that sits at the center of all of this, and it's the one nobody can agree on. What matters more, legacy or leverage? Legacy in the traditional sense means NFL greatness. It means Sunday spotlight, playoff runs, Pro Bowl selections, maybe a championship ring. It means being part of American sports mythology. That carries weight. It carries history, and for a lot of fans, nothing replaces it. But leverage means something different. Leverage means ownership of your career. It means financial security so deep that your grandchildren never have to worry. It means building a brand that transcends one sport, one league, one country. It means choosing your own definition of success instead of inheriting someone else's. Both arguments have merit, and the fact that we're even having this debate tells you something about where sports culture is heading. 10 years ago, this conversation wouldn't exist. A quarterback exploring an overseas basketball deal would have been laughed off the internet before the headline finished loading. But the world moves fast. Markets evolve. Athlete power evolves. And the families bold enough to challenge the old model are the ones who end up reshaping it. If someone sat you down right now and put two contracts on the table, one offering $4.6 million over 4 years in the NFL, with weekly physical punishment, coaching uncertainty, and no guarantee you'll ever see a second deal, and another offering $175 million guaranteed overseas, with brand freedom, business flexibility, and a global platform waiting for you on day one. Can you honestly say the choice is obvious? Can you honestly say tradition alone is worth the gap? Deion Sanders has spent his entire life defying expectations. He played 2 professional sports when the world told him to pick one. He took over a college program nobody expected him to fix and turned it into a national conversation overnight. He raised a son under a microscope and prepared him for a moment exactly like this one, a moment where the conventional path and the unconventional path diverge, and the only wrong answer is the one you didn't think through. Years from now, people might look back at this stretch, the draft slide, the cryptic posts, the overseas rumors, the backlash, the debates, and recognize it as the turning point. The moment elite athletes realized the world was bigger than one league, and the smartest play wasn't always the expected one. Shedeur Sanders might end up in a Browns uniform, carving out an NFL career that silences every doubter. Or he might step onto a court halfway around the world and build something nobody saw coming. Either way, the conversation has already changed. And once a conversation like this opens, it doesn't close. So where do you land? Legacy or leverage? Drop it in the comments. Every perspective matters here because this debate is bigger than one family, bigger than one contract, and bigger than one sport.